Greetings and salutations, this is Imperator Vespasian and his trusty sidekick.
Hello.
Today we're having a look at Swedish Infantry for the Second World War. I haven't seen other people do Swedes, and you can't buy them as figures as far as I know, so I thought I'd put these together. The figures are made by, the basic figure is a Blitzkrieg German infantry figure. The helmet, just here, is a Russian helmet with the bottom bit there cut off, the side bit on each side cut off, and the rim trimmed. The hats are standard Russian hats. I was going to add a little bit of milliput to the top to make it slightly higher, but I decided to leave it. They're the standard sort of Russian style hat. Painted white, or whitey grey, because that's the hat the Swedes used. Equipment wise, the most difficult bit was the gun, just here. That's the standard Swedish light machine gun. It's a composite piece put together out of a Japanese machine gun with the bottom cut off, and a Japanese machine gun with the bottom cut off, a ammunition cartridge put in the side there, so it looks, and I've added a piece of spear to the base to make it look more like the Swedish light machine gun of the Second World War, because I couldn't find a gun that matched. I also cut the back off and I put a rifle butt on the actual machine gun, because the Japanese machine gun is further down, and I put the back up just there. So it looks more like the Swedish machine gun of the period. Weapon wise, everyone's armed with a rifle, apart from the Lance Corporal and the Sergeant. Where's the Sergeant? There you go. That's the officer for the squad, and he's armed with a pistol, but he also has a one of the versions of the PPSH on his back, because that's the standard. It looks very much like the standard submachine gun used by the Swedes. The water bottle here is the Japanese water bottle, off the Japanese sprue for bolt action. I just got the water bottle and just stuck it on, because the Swedes used a round water bottle as opposed to the sort of oblong water bottle used by the Germans. Right, the pack is from the German engineers sprue. If you have a look at the German Pioneer pack, that is the pack carried by the German engineers, although I had to cut the bottom of the pack off, so I've used the side bag from that casting, and I've used the actual top as a backpack. A few other troops actually have there you go, that's more or less the full pack, because I was able to get away with that. If I can get it to focus, that's the full pack, and there's the side bag and the water bottle and the spade. He has a shovel down this side, just here. Some troops have the shovel, and for the figures that didn't have a shovel, I gave, because all these troops have the shovel on the back of their pack, but for some troops I've put an axe. You see that axe? That axe is from the Gripping Beast Saxons and Viking boxes. You get a lot of spare throwing axes, and that's one of the axes from there. So he's carrying an axe on his backpack, and this guy is carrying a shovel, and the shovel is from, as I said, the Pioneer box. In the Pioneer box you get lots of different types of packs. This one suits the Swedes perfectly, because I didn't have to edit it in any way. But this one is effectively the same thing, but I cut all that bottom bit off. If that makes any sense. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it did.
Indeed.
So what did I do?
You got all of the equipment on its backs and backs. And your back. Yeah. Right, so you got all you need to. So you got all the pieces of from the backpack, from the Pioneer box, and the different boxes of the Vikings and Saxons, because you get a lot of spare foreign axes and extra bits for other figures.
Yeah, the officers don't have axes. That's the NCO. So that's Corporal, and he doesn't have an axe because
he won't get his hands dirty.
He does more pointing. Yeah. That's what he does. He points. That's what officers do. They point. Everyone else has to dig things. So everyone carries either an axe or a shovel. May seem strange, World War II infantry carrying axes, but you need an axe if you're fighting in Northern Europe, because there's a lot of trees, and an axe actually comes in quite handy. And you see lots of photographs from the period of troops either with the shovel or the axe. So you finally got to see everything I have used the German Pioneer box for. Because you remember when I bought the Pioneer box, the German engineer box?
Yeah, I think you bought like two, didn't you?
No.
You were doing that thing.
No, I bought one box.
I thought you bought two.
And no, the other one was Falschenjäger.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I ain't got around to that yet.
I'm surprised you remember that word.
So, why? It's German.
Volksenträger.
Falschenjäger.
Volksenträger.
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 Yeah, falling light infantry.
There you go, falling light infantry.
Yeah, light infantry who are trained to fall out of planes. So, yeah. Quite a bit of work's gone into them. It took quite a bit of time to stick these guys together. So, packs from the engineering pack, backpacks, sorry, and some of the equipment from the engineering pack. I couldn't use, for all the rear and side equipment, I couldn't use a lot of the stuff you normally get in the German box. And also the Russians don't get much kit. You get a bread bag. That's about all you get for the Russians. And some shovels. So, yeah, there we have it. Paint-wise, they're painted in a sort of uniform grey colour, which is a green, I believe. Is uniform grey or green? Anyway, they're painted in green. Helmets from the Russian box, hats from the Russian box, the fur hat used by the Swedes.
Grey. The grey one.
What?
The colour for that?
No, the hats are white.
I thought they were grey.
No, I used ash grey and mixed some white into it to make it a lot lighter. So, kind of grey, yeah, but they're a lot lighter than like Russian hats. I would assume it's because of the fur they used.
The fear, yeah.
Fear, no. The fur they used is probably white. I don't know, I haven't looked that up, I don't care. One of the troops is carrying a Molotov cocktail straight out of the Russian box. One of the troops is throwing a grenade. We have the two officers pointing with that awesome pointing hand. No, it's not the pointing hand, it's the hand open hand. The Russian box has pointing hands in it.
Yeah.
But I used all my pointing hands for my artillery, so...
That's like a hand, that's like a charge of...
To sort of go that way, whereas the pointing hand is attack that. Yeah, so the Russian box has all the pointing hands in it. So yeah. So, the Swedes, technically were never part of the Second World War. They never declared war on anybody.
I was going to ask a question about
neutral. That. However, with the Russians invading Finland, the Swedes thought it would be a really good idea to help their neighbour. Not because they were politically aligned with the Finns, but because if Finland was occupied by communist Russia, then it would only be a matter of time before Russia annexed Sweden.
It's a bit weird though, because when you see maps from World War II and the Cold War, after Churchill's Iron Curtain speech, Sweden is always in white for neutral.
Yeah.
But it took part in Finland's war, so does that mean it should be on the Allied side?
No, Sweden was never neutral in the Second World War. It was a non-belligerent. They're different. Neutral countries say, I am not doing anything with anyone.
Norway?
Norway was annexed by, well, Germany.
Exactly, Norway said that.
Yeah, although Britain was trying to annex it at the time, so, you know.
We failed on the beaches.
We failed, but totally the Germans better.
We landed and then got our ass kicked.
But we were invading Finland. We arrived the day after. The Germans got there first. But we did mine Finland, which is why Germany
Finland?
Not Finland. Sorry, Norway. We mined Norway, the Norwegian ports, and there was an incident with a ship called the Altmark as well, which is too complicated to go into now. But that persuaded the Germans that Britain was about to annex Norway. So the Germans quickly put together a fleet and sent it up to invade Norway, and the British arrived the day after the Germans invaded. So we were late, but we did manage to take quite a few positions. It's just we just weren't really organised enough to fight against the Germans.
No one is when they just land on the beach immediately.
Well, no, it's just I don't think we were ready for the terrain. We took trucks with wheels. You need track vehicles to.
On D-Day, we took on the beaches of France. We took tanks.
Yeah, but that wasn't mountainous fjords, was it?
Mm.
And anyway, for a lot of the beaches, there were stupid beaches to land on because they landed on the wrong beaches. They landed on beaches with cliffs with tanks. Well, how are you going to get a tank up a cliff?
Well, one of the tanks flew out and landed inside the cliff.
Yeah, that was the British. The landing craft threw a British Churchill onto the beach and the Germans ran away. They thought we had flying tanks. Yeah, that was an impressive one. But yeah, so Sweden found itself with its neighbour about to be occupied by Russia. And Sweden figured that the best thing to do would be to help the Finns fight on Finnish territory rather than fighting on Swedish territory. And they sent around about 8,000, probably about 10,000 soldiers to fight for the Finns. They weren't volunteers, they were regular Swedish army. So it wasn't like in Spain where volunteers went over to fight for either side. These were actually regular soldiers. They were professional soldiers and they went over to fight against the Russians. So they saved a lot of time and effort. Because if you had the Swedes not helped the Finns, Finland would probably have lost the war. And then the Second World War would have started with Russia holding Finland and Sweden probably.
Means that Sweden supported the Axis.
Supported, well, it had a huge amount of exports to Germany during the Second World War. Huge amount of exports. So the Germans kept the Swedish economy going quite well, but they weren't exactly pro-German. As I said, they were non-belligerent. They were non-belligerent.
Tell the person that's currently threatening at the moment, deal with everything else later.
Yeah, well, Germany wasn't a threat to Sweden. So
I.e. beat up Russia to stop the communists from taking over your country.
Oh yeah, Russia was a threat to Sweden.
There you go.
Yeah, Germany wasn't a threat to Sweden. Also, during the war, the Germans tried to round up all the Jews in Denmark, and instead of sending them to Denmark,
Wait, Denmark fell?
Yeah, Germany occupied it in about 40 minutes. It was a mistake actually. The Germans went in and the Danes weren't supposed to fight them, but the Danes on the border started fighting the Germans.
What do Axis?
No, well, they were. But they were sort of allied to Germany at the time. But there was always a chance that Britain could land troops in Denmark.
Well, yeah, but the easiest place.
Yes, exactly.
In Denmark, walk straight behind the Germans.
Yeah, so if Britain would have occupied Denmark, we could have very easily invaded Germany. We could have gone straight for Berlin. And there was nothing the Germans would have been able to do to stop us. So, because of this,
they occupied Denmark.
The Germans occupied Denmark, but it was supposed to be a protectorate, as in the Germans would not actually occupy Denmark.
Yes.
They would just put troops on the coast, but they wouldn't interfere with the government. But it all went to pot because people didn't know, no one was told what was happening, and so the Danish soldiers started fighting the Germans.
So they thought the Germans were invading them?
Yes, because they were. But it's complicated. Yeah, the Germans didn't know they were invading Denmark. They thought they'd been invited, so they just drove straight over the border with all their tanks. The Danes didn't know anything about anything. No, the government hadn't told the Danish border guards, so the Danish border guards thought the Germans were invading them. But it was lucky because had the Germans been invading them, they would have dive bombed all the cities and stuff. So lots of Danes would have died. But
beforehand.
yeah, it was a huge mess. But anyway, it was all sorted out. So the Danes sent. Anyway, I'm telling about the Jews. The Danes sent all the Jews to Sweden.
You don't want that.
No, they sent all the refugees to Sweden so the Germans couldn't get their hands on them. Because you know what the Germans thought about Jews.
You know what anyone with the beginning of alt.
Yeah, that's it.
Expect.
Yeah.
To happen to Jews.
So basically, the Danes said, we're not sending these people to concentration camps for their own safety. No. We'll send them to Sweden. So they did. They sent them all to Sweden, and they survived the war. So Sweden wasn't exactly pro Germany in the Second World War. Also, when we invaded Norway, the British or the Germans demanded that the Swedes allow the Germans to use their phone network, because the telephone network went over the border into Norway because it's a very close border. And the Swedes said, "Yeah, that's fine. You can use our phone network." And when the British landed, they asked the Swedes, "Can we use your phone network?" And the Swedes went, "Yeah, you can use our phone network." So you had the British and the Germans using the phone network. And the Germans asked the Swedes, "What are the British saying on the phones?" And the Swedes were listening to what was happening. And they just told the Germans what the British, or the orders the British were sending.
The British asked them what the Germans were saying.
And the Swedes told the Germans and told the British exactly what the Germans.
Didn't care.
Yeah. So Sweden wasn't exactly on both sides. It helped both sides. It didn't help both sides. It just gave the same information to both sides because they didn't want to actually ally with Britain because they didn't trust Britain, and they didn't want to ally with Germany because they weren't German.
Half population will be sent into concentration
yeah, that's a good point. All these refugees would end up in a camp for their own protection, apparently. So basically, the Swedes were kind of not on either side. However, they were fighting against the Russians. So these Swedish troops went into Finland, and throughout the war, the Swedes aided the Finnish army against the Swedes. Against the Russians.
And aided the Danes and aided
they helped the Danes, yes.
And aided the British.
Yeah. So, in the later stages of the war, Sweden asked Britain if they wanted to use Swedish air bases to bomb Germany. So the British landed aircraft in Sweden. At first, the bombers flying over Germany, bombing Germany. If they were damaged, they were allowed to land in Sweden. And because there were a lot of German air bases in Norway, which would attack them, so they were allowed to land for safety in Sweden. And then later on, they were allowed to actually operate bombers from Swedish territory. So when the war ended, the Swedes were able to say, "See, we helped you."
Therefore, not the enemy.
Yeah. Although, had Germany won the war, they'd have been able to go to Germany and say, "See, we helped you."
Yeah.
So you're a very small country with a very small population trying to survive during the Second World War without actually getting invaded by anyone.
By making friends with everyone.
Trying to be nice to everyone, yeah.
The Russians.
The Swedes did carry on fighting alongside the Finns until the very late stages of the war, and then they withdrew their troops around about the time that Finland was beginning negotiations with the Russians. Because it would have overcomplicated negotiations with the Russians had there been Swedes running around. Likewise with the Norwegians, they pulled out at the same time. So there were no Norwegians fighting there as well. The Swedes never sent troops to Central Europe, they never sent troops to the Eastern Front. So they only fought in their own little region. They weren't interested in helping Germany invade Russia or anything like that. It was self-interest. It was just entirely self-interest. They did sell a huge amount of weapons to the Finns as well. In fact, nearly all the Gloucester Gladiators were piloted by Swedes. They were actually Swedish planes. And Finland handed its Gladiators over to Sweden to pilot. Although they're all in Finnish colours, they were actually Swedish pilots. This is an interesting point, in case we've done a video on Gloucester Gladiators. So, any more questions?
No, that's it.
That's it. That's it. That's the Swedish squad. I've only got one squad so far. I'm going to see how they play, but I'm not really too interested at the moment in really making our Winter War armies really big, because they weren't that big anyway, and it would seem a bit of a waste building huge amounts of units, except for the Russians. You never have too many Russians.
That's how I played them.
Yeah, you should just if you never know what to do, just go online and buy Russians.
Yeah.
Because you never go wrong. Because there were so many Russians, it was unbelievable. There's Russians everywhere.
You might lose the game, but you win the war.
Yeah, because you always got more Russians.
Yeah.
So even if you get totally defeated in a bolt action game, you can still make fun of your opponent.
Yeah, you just bring double the amount instead of that amount.
Yeah, just say, well, it doesn't matter because I'm just going to swamp you next game. So.
Yeah.
But hopefully these Swedes are going to make a difference to my glorious Finnish army.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let us know what you think of the figures and how I did the conversions. It was probably one of the more complicated conversions I've done so far. So, yeah. Outro?
So if you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe, and comment down below what you think of the Swedish Infantry. That's everything from me.
And everything from him. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.
See ya.